News now on BBC One with Natasha Kaplinsky.
The British ambassador to Saudi Arabia warns more attacks on Westerners are likely. Saudi forces are still hunting for the 3 hostage takers who got away. Doctors warn medical care standards on some airlines put passengers at risk. A young driver admits killing a mother and 2 children whilst drunk and on drugs. And the long goodbye. Chelsea finally part company with Claudio Ranieri. Hello, very good evening to you. Britain's ambassador to Saudi Arabia has warned that terrorists there may be in the final stages of preparing more attacks on Westerners. 22 people, including a British oil executive, were killed by militants in the city of Khobar at the weekend. A huge manhunt is underway for some of the gunmen who evaded capture. Here, the Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel to the kingdom.
Saudi royalty visit the wounded in hospital. Until recently, they denied there was a terrorist problem in their country. Now they insist progress is being made. But attacks are becoming more violent. 22 foreigners died in this latest gun battle and siege, targeted by Al-Qaeda sympathizers for being on Muslim holy land.
Don't cry, don't cry. It's all over.
Some survivors have already left the country for home. What happened to them in a supposedly secure compound may cause others to leave too.
They were carrying grenades and I could hear the grenades being rolled on the ground and bursting out. That scared me a lot. Because I could hear ta-da-da-da-da rolling noise and then a big bang. The whole building was shaking.
On the internet, a statement apparently from the head of Al-Qaeda in Saudi Arabia hails the attack as a great victory. It gloats that after the murder of the British victim Michael Hamilton, his body was dragged through the city behind a car. Foreign Office officials are investigating reports that a second Briton was killed or injured in the attacks. There is still some confusion and questions to be answered. And one of those questions is how this dramatic raid by special forces allowed 3 of the 4 gunmen to escape, despite backup on the ground.
They will be arrested hopefully shortly. But those people are dangerous. A single one of them is dangerous. We saw what 4 of them were able to do.
Because of those dangers, America has told its citizens to leave. Britain is urging no one else to go there. The British ambassador believes more attacks are likely.
They are clearly possible. I would go further than that and say they are probable. No one can ever be satisfied while a terrorist campaign is carrying on, while terrorists evade justice. And that's why we are helping. We have guys out here in the embassy working with the Saudis.
Even with that international assistance, they've failed to break Saudi Arabia's militant cells. Al-Qaeda has become a real threat in Osama bin Laden's home country. Paul Welsh, BBC News.
At least 12 people have been killed and dozens more injured by a bomb at a Shiite mosque in the Pakistan city of Karachi. The attack has fueled fears of sectarian violence amongst rival Muslim groups. Yesterday, a radical Sunni preacher was killed in the city. Many airlines are not doing enough to protect the health of their passengers, according to a report by the British Medical Association. It says the standard of medical equipment and training of flight crews varies enormously and calls for international rules to enforce minimum standards. This report now from Duncan Kennedy.
Business or pleasure? The closest most of us get to the subject of airline health is the in-flight safety demonstration. But many passengers do require medical help. Yet some carriers are facing turbulence today over the standards of care they offer.
Could ask you to do or what the Medlink positions.
Virgin is one of those that makes sure its crew are medically trained. But today's report says other, unidentified airlines are not so rigorous.
We'd like to see all airlines working to the European standard of having their cabin crew with some first aid training. This seems to be very helpful. It means that they know when to call a doctor or nurse and they know how to help the individual, if there isn't a doctor or nurse on board, to the best of their ability.
No one knows exactly how many passengers need medical help when they take their flights. Some think the figure could be as high as 1 in 1,400 passengers. And whilst most only require attention for things like headaches and dehydration, for others, it's much more serious. Ruth Christopherson is one who knows how serious it can get and welcomes the BMA's findings. Her daughter Emma died after a fatal blood clot following a 20-hour flight from Australia.
We're very pleased that it's come out like this, because we've been saying this since we started campaigning at VADA, that they need to be responsible for passenger health and not just their safety.
Today's report also found medical equipment varied, with few fixed rules on kit content or training. But large carriers like BMI say British standards are among the best in the world.
Certainly in the UK and at BMI, we take this very seriously, and we have state-of-the-art equipment in the aircraft now that's capable of transmitting clinical information directly from the patient via satellite to our doctors on the ground.
British Airways also takes pride in its standards, but they are standards not met everywhere, and high-quality, high-altitude healthcare is not universal. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News.
The American-led coalition in Iraq has ruled out the two main Sunni Muslim contenders to become the country's new president. Their names had been put forward by the Iraqi Governing Council. And as the political struggle continued, another bomb exploded in central Baghdad, killing 4 people. Orla Guerin reports now from Baghdad.
Terror in Baghdad. It should have been a day of progress, the birth of a new government. Instead, a busy street attacked without warning. No one knows who the target was. Anyone here can be a target.
Everybody back up. This area is not secure. Please back up.
This family dangerously close to the blast. The dead this time were Iraqi civilians, not American soldiers.
There were no coalition casualties, nor is there any coalition target vicinity of this location. So just like last week, this clearly appears to be a target against the Iraqi people and their progress toward democracy and sovereignty.
As the wounded were treated in hospital, Iraqi officials echoing the American view, blaming supporters of the old regime, saying they wanted to derail democracy. More trouble on that front today. The members of Iraq's American-appointed Governing Council should have been choosing a new cabinet, but that was delayed at America's request. Council members are crying foul. Tonight there's deadlock. The argument is over who to appoint to the post of president, a ceremonial role. The council members and American officials have different ideas. There's talk of bitter argument. The wrangling is expected to continue tomorrow. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Baghdad.
5 people have been killed and several others injured after a tourist boat capsized on an underground lake in Austria. The 27 on board were thought to be Belgian and German tourists. Rescue workers said 3 of those who died had become trapped underneath the overturned boat in freezing water. The survivors are being treated for shock. A man has admitted killing a woman and 2 young children after losing control of a stolen car whilst drunk and high on drugs. Dean Martin, who's 23, was driving at up to 75 miles an hour when he struck a group of mothers and children returning from a dance class. Andrew Castle reports.
Dean Martin had already careered dangerously through the side streets of Glenrothes in a stolen car when he hit the curb and mounted the pavement here in this housing estate on the outskirts of the town. In his path were Anne Martin, her 8-year-old daughter Ashley and Ross Snedden, a 5-year-old. All were killed. The car drove on and was later found dumped in a nearby street. Today, Dean Martin, who'd been drunk and high on ecstasy, apologised in court to the families of the victims.
The justice has started. It'll never be full justice for us and our families. I'll never bring them back. I'll never bring Anne and Ashley back. But it's a start.
Ross Snedden's mother was struck by the car and has been left permanently disabled.
I don't want my wee boy dying in vain. This guy's got to pay. He's taken 3 innocent lives and he's got to serve time.
The group of mothers and children had been returning from a dance class when they were hit by the car. Martin will be sentenced at a later date. Andrew Castle, BBC News, Glasgow.
There are new calls tonight for an independent examination of cases where children have been taken into care on the basis of disputed medical evidence. The government ordered social services departments to carry out a review after the acquittal of Angela Cannings, who was wrongly convicted of murdering her babies. A survey by the BBC has found that just a handful of cases are likely to be reopened, as Alison Holt reports.
When Angela Cannings was freed by the Court of Appeal, it was heralded as a landmark case. She was cleared of murdering her 2 babies after the evidence of medical experts was discredited. It gave hope to parents whose children were taken into care after they were accused of faking illness in them. But the BBC's survey suggests, despite the Cannings judgment, very few care cases will be re-examined. Jane, who can't be identified, was accused of trying to suffocate her daughter, but when in care, the child's seizures continued. She's now back home. Jane believes any review of this sort of case needs to be done independently, not by social services.
If they admit that mistakes have been made, then they're leaving themselves wide open to litigation and ultimately huge redress payments to all the families concerned.
After Cannings, it was claimed these parents, who also can't be identified, were among hundreds of families wrongly accused of trying to harm their children. Social services were told to review all current care cases. The BBC asked social services departments in England the outcome of the review. 70 councils responded. Of those, 52 said they would not be reopening cases. 5 said they had not ruled this out or that there were ongoing court cases, but only 10% had any independent involvement. Experts say the job of social services when looking at the evidence is to put the safety of the child first.
I think it does vindicate the good practice that goes on a multi-agency basis when we're trying to understand what may have happened to a child when we have concerns about fabricated or induced illness.
These are complex cases and abuse does happen, but the review is unlikely to satisfy the parents who continue to insist their families have been torn apart unjustly. Alison Holt, BBC News.
Millions of people in Zimbabwe face a new threat of starvation because its government has told the World Food Programme to wind down its operations in the country. The agency has been feeding 5 million people, but Zimbabwe's President, Robert Mugabe, says the country is now able to feed itself. The BBC is banned from reporting in Zimbabwe. Hilary Anderson sent this report from South Africa.
Gruel is what many Zimbabweans eat, one bowl, once or twice a day. For 2 years, half the nation survived on handouts, and now they're being told there is no crisis.
This year. More details from Chief Correspondent Ruben Barwe.
This is the good news. As told nightly on state TV, there's been a bumper harvest. No more starvation. Zimbabwe is producing enough grain to feed itself and more. And the best bit, the government says, foreign food aid is no longer needed. Now, the World Food Programme, that's been feeding 4.5 million Zimbabweans, has been forced to slash its operations. Robert Mugabe wants the world to take its food elsewhere.
But this year has been a very good year. Good rains. They came late, but they have done us good. And we have more food than we need, and we will have a bit of surplus to put into our grain reserves.
But if this has been a bonanza harvest, it's not there to see. The land reeks of want, fields lie barren. This former soldier and his son were given white-owned farmland as part of Mugabe's land reform program. But their harvest has been minute. Why? Because they only planted this one field this year. They've never farmed before and can't afford the basics.
Fertilizer. I have no money for fertilizer or seeds, and I don't even have a plow. Most of my land is idle, and a lot of my crops just wilted.
Independent surveys say Zimbabwe has only produced half of what it needs to feed its people this year. And now, hunger has come to the cities. Over 60% in Zimbabwe's towns are short of food. This woman, Lado, is sick from hunger right in the heart of the capital. Sometimes she's too weak to move. She begged our cameraman for help. I used to get food from the church, she said, but the government stopped that now. I don't understand why. Down the road, this middle-class family was struggling too. They were afraid to show their faces. They think Mugabe's stopping aid because he wants to control the food ahead of next year's elections.
All the grain in the country is going to be under their control. And in a desperate bid to win the election, they're going to do anything possible. And I think food is what they are going to use to get a vote.
Mugabe insists this is not political, but he's chasing aid away at a time of hunger. And for his people, this could be catastrophic. Hilary Anderson, BBC News in Johannesburg.
Jeremy Bamba, who's serving a life sentence for murdering his parents, his sister and her twin sons 19 years ago, has been attacked in prison. He was stabbed by another inmate at Full Sutton Jail near York and needed 26 stitches in his face. After months of speculation, Chelsea have finally sacked their coach Claudio Ranieri. The club issued a brief statement in the last hour, simply stating that Ranieri was leaving the club and that they were in talks over the terms of his departure. There's been no word of his replacement, although speculation centres on Jose Mourinho, the current Porto coach. Sue Thurl reports.
Claudio Ranieri arrived at Stamford Bridge in 2000, armed with an interpreter and a smile. The Italian, who tasted success in Italy and Spain, was largely unknown to the British football fraternity, but wasted little time in making his mark. Following the acrimonious departure of Gianluca Vialli, he carefully guided a fretful Chelsea from 17th to 6th and established a reputation as a man who didn't quite know his best side.
If until now I am tinkerman because I make a lot rotation, I don't know.
The Italian came closest to a trophy in 2002 when Chelsea reached the FA Cup final, but he was outfoxed once again by his old adversary Arsene Wenger. The Fulham Road faithful were forced to cede bragging rights to the Islington in crowd. But Chelsea's salvation arrived in the form of a Russian with an Italian name and a bank balance of billions. Suddenly, even Claudio was struggling to keep track of who was coming and going.
It's the last presentation, huh? For today.
But speculation about new faces at the bridge began to include Ranieri, and despite the rumours linking a succession of managers with his job, he took Chelsea to second in the league and the last four of the Champions League, ending that miserable run against Arsenal along the way. And even though the whispers about his successor at Stamford Bridge had reached a deafening roar, the Italian handled it all with typical good humour.
I continue to work, but I don't stand still. I continue to work. Okay. I am dead, but I continue.
Ironically, his legacy at Chelsea could be his development of outstanding English talent, along with a reputation enhanced by ability and no little charm. There's no doubt other suitors will come calling, so it probably won't be goodbye Claudio, more arrivederci. Sue Thurl, BBC News.
The campaigner Jane Tomlinson has arrived back in Britain 29 days after she began her charity cycle ride across Europe. Jane, who's suffering from terminal cancer, has been riding tandem with her brother. It's the latest in a series of fundraising events she's undertaken since she was diagnosed with the disease. Emma Howard reports.
Glad to be back in Britain, Jane Tomlinson and her brother Luke start the last leg of their marathon charity bike ride from Rome to Rothwell in Leeds. But it's not been an easy ride for the 40-year-old paediatric radiographer whose cancer has grown worse during the 29-day trek.
This might be the last thing I do. I did have in mind some triathlons this summer, but I need to see how my health is really. But this is the final year. I'm not fundraising after this year at all.
4 weeks ago, Jane and Luke set off from St. Peter's Square in Rome, cycling through Italy and France. They've already raised £90,000 for this trip for cancer and children's charities and hope to raise even more in the next 6 days. 3.5 years ago, Jane was told she had just months to live, but the mother of three defied doctors by battling through a number of marathons, half a triathlon, and now her Rome-to-home epic bike ride. Jane's husband, Mike, seen here on the left, says his wife's a brave and remarkable woman.
Because no one's ever done anything like this before anywhere in the world, no one really appreciates what she's doing to get to where she is. And I think people are just beginning to realise that she really is very poorly and she really does push herself to limits that people just can't imagine.
For Jane, the trip has been a struggle, but not so much because of her health. It's the family she's missed.
It has been very hard, and the hardest thing has been being away from my family. I didn't expect that to be so difficult.
Jane already has an MBE for her charity work, but says it's now time to concentrate on other things. As she pedalled off from Dover this morning, she said she couldn't wait to get home to be with Mike and their 3 children. Emma Howard, BBC News.
Well, that's about it for now. There are, of course, news updates throughout the evening on BBC News 24, and I'll be back with more from the newsroom at 10 o'clock here on BBC One. Now it's time to join the news teams around the UK. Good evening.
Good evening. The convicted murderer Jeremy Bamba has been attacked by another inmate at Full Sutton Jail in York. He had his throat slit as he made a phone call. The police are investigating.
Jeremy Bamba had 26 stitches to a wound at the back of his neck after the attack on Saturday afternoon. He was taken to hospital but is recovering now in jail. He thanked the prison service and hospital staff for reacting quickly. The prison service confirms an inmate was taken to an outside hospital after an assault, but is refusing to comment further. The police are investigating. In 1986, Bamba was convicted of the murder of his adoptive parents, sister and her twin sons at the family's farm in Tolsant Darcy in Essex. He's lost 2 appeals against his conviction, but continues to protest his innocence. 2 years ago, the Court of Appeal ordered him to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
A woman has died in a car crash in Essex. The accident happened at around midnight on Brightlingsea Road in Wivenhoe. A 38-year-old woman died at the scene. A 6-month-old baby and a man were taken to hospital with head injuries. Police are appealing for witnesses after a man was found dead in the road at Yaxham in Norfolk. It's believed 22-year-old Craig Burrell was hit by a car. A 19-year-old woman went voluntarily to the police. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, has been attending one of the country's biggest Christian gatherings in Norfolk. Dr. Williams was preaching at this year's national pilgrimage to Walsingham.
Pilgrims have been coming to this holy village for centuries, ever since a vision of the Virgin Mary was seen here. And that's what this celebration is about, although it's not without its critics.
Mary can't save you, only Jesus. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth and the life.
Protesters are from another Christian group who believe it's wrong to worship an image of Mary. Even so, they're outnumbered. The National Pilgrimage is the biggest event in the Anglo-Catholic calendar. This year it's bigger than ever, with the Archbishop of Canterbury as the special guest.
It's a tremendous privilege and delight to be here, and I think today shows what people always discover here. People of all races, all ages can meet here and really discover something about Christianity that matters.
And yes, these pilgrims are here to be part of a huge spiritual gathering and to share in the service and communion. But many are also here because it's a good day out, and the undisputed highlight is the Archbishop's sermon.
I'm come as pilgrims today to be blessed, to see the Bishop in particular.
For the experience really, and the fellowship and the pomp and ceremony.
It's a great sense of coming together, people with a common mind and a common faith, and it's just brilliant.
Rowan Williams is the first Archbishop of Canterbury to speak here in more than a decade. He took the opportunity to preach about the importance of faith in these troubled times.
In Iraq and Zimbabwe and her own Holy Land.
It was a message that was warmly received, one that will travel far and wide as the pilgrims journey home. Jo Kent, BBC Look East, Walsingham.
Posters showing the effects of using crack cocaine are going up across Essex today. They're aimed at young people. Police say 60% of thefts are committed by drug addicts who need up to £300 a day to feed their habit. 150,000 people have packed onto the streets of Luton for the town's 29th International Carnival, and our reporter Jane Death was one of them.
The St Kitts Association were at Wardown Park early, putting on the Ritz for Carnival.
This is only the second time I've ever put this costume on, so I'm limited to how much actual movement there is in it.
Every culture was at its colourful best, warming up for the main event and the party later. At 1:30, 1,500 dancers and musicians poured onto the streets. Verdict from the crowd: Notting Hill, eat your heart out.
It's really nice. It's, costumes are just out of this world. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves, nice and calm, lovely atmosphere.
They've made a really good effort. Some of the costumes are really good, brilliant. More like Notting Hill.
It's my first time in Luton.
I usually go to the London one, but it's good so far.
There's a lot of different costumes and they're all colourful and they look really, really nice.
It's better this year. It's spread out a bit better. It's a lot better. I mean, before it used to be all crowded in the one town, but now it's spread out more, so there's more people coming down here. It's a lot better this year than it has been.
The costumes were bigger and brighter, and maybe it was the hot weather, but the dancing was even wilder this year. The party will go on for hours. Jane Deeth, BBC Look East at Luton Carnival.
Thousands of people packed the seafront in Southend today for the climax to the resort's annual air show. Organisers say they believe the crowd over the 2 days may be one of the biggest ever.
For some, getting to the air show was slow going. For others, it was a breeze, dropping in from 6,000 feet at 120 miles an hour. Hardly room to assemble a deck chair, but for the RAF Falcons display team, a place on the beach was guaranteed. They were one of the star turns in a programme which featured spectacular displays, 40 aircraft, old and new.
Didn't realise that the parachutes were going to come down there, and just sitting here and being in perfect position. But I think wherever you sit along the front, what makes Southend Air Show so good, is because it's a natural grandstand for a perfect air show.
I just like the army side of it, you know, watching how they do it and everything. You feel very proud to be British.
They queued in the sun for the chance to hop into a Harrier. The fact it was pretend and made from plastic didn't seem to matter. In the air, the real hardware. Pilots blessed with great skill, an event blessed with glorious weather.
Well, the weather to any outdoor event is quite crucial. We go for the Maybank holiday weekend because apart from about 3 years ago when it was a bit of a washout, over the 19 years of air show that we've had, apart from that 1 year, we've always had good weather.
This is the biggest free air show in Europe. The organisers believe that over the 2 days, the event may have drawn close to 750,000 spectators. Kevin Birch, BBC Look East in Southend.
Well, great weather today. What about the rest of half term? Here's Jules.
It's shaping up quite nicely. It has indeed been a lovely day today. We've had a few isolated showers over the last few hours and a few more of those to come, but for most of us it'll be a dry evening. This main band of rain still down to the southwest, but I think during tonight it will slowly trudge northeastwards, bringing with it this thicker cloud and some outbreaks of rain, but most of that will probably be quite light and patchy, and some of us will stay largely dry. Now, temperatures tonight down to lows of about 9 Celsius, that's 48 Fahrenheit, but many of us staying in double figures, and overnight we'll have just a very light southeasterly wind. So tomorrow morning we hold on to that thicker cloud and those outbreaks of rain for a time, but I think as the day goes on we should start to see things brightening up nicely with some sunny intervals developing and just the chance of an odd isolated shower. They could happen just about anywhere. Now, temperatures tomorrow in the best of the sunshine up to around 22 Celsius, that's 72 Fahrenheit, and the wind's just a light one really between the northwest and the northeast. And here's the outlook, fine and dry all the way as high pressure builds across us. In fact, by Saturday we could have temperatures as high as 23 Celsius, that's 73 Fahrenheit. That's the forecast. Mike.
That looks okay. Well, that's it from us. I'll be back with the late bulletin just after 10. Until then, bye for now.
I just try to think of them as they were. I can remember faces, they were young faces, happy faces. We knew we had a job to do and to do it as best we could. And we did as best we could.
60 years on, Look East remembers the heroic men and women of the East. D-Day, this week on Look East, 6:30 on 1.
What really brasses you off? I've been covering the UK, finding out about the 10 things that really make your blood boil. And now we're almost at the end of our journey. It's the last week, but there's still time to vote. We will be revealing our results in a live final. So will the power of your vote persuade our Brassed-Off candidates to change their ways? Brassed-Off Britain continues tomorrow, 7 o'clock, BBC One.
Hello there, it's been a fine bank holiday for most of us, but for a few, it's been thoroughly wet. What a contrast across southern parts of England. Lots of sunshine and temperatures up into the low 20s across central and eastern areas, but down in the southwest we're really struggling. Plenty of rain here, hardly getting up into double figures. This is the setup this evening, the rain pushing up to Northern Ireland, the rest of Wales, some other southern parts of England, but north and east of that, a fine evening to come, bit of mist near the east coast and the odd sharp shower for the Western Highlands. So that's the setup now. In 24 hours time, very different. By then the best of the brightness will be across the more southern and western areas, so quite a role reversal, a lot of cloud and rain across the north and the east in contrast to today. Well, how do we get from here to there? Well, we've got rain pushing its way northwards and eastwards during the rest of this evening and overnight, and by the end of the night it will be settled across many central and eastern parts of the UK. A thoroughly damp start to the day here. Things perking up though across Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. The mist should clear, the sky should brighten, and we'll see some sunshine to end the day. In the brightest spells, temperatures across the southwest getting as high as 20 degrees. For most of us in the mid to high teens, particularly cool where it stays cloudy and damp. On the horizon though, bright skies loom out in the Atlantic, and they've got southern parts of the UK's names on it as we go into the middle of the week. Sunshine here, some patchy rain for the north and the west of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Similar sort of pattern as we go into Thursday as well. The best of the brightness for the south. Settling down here across the south and the east, warming up. Some patchy rain at times across the north and the west.